The technical logistics of broadcasting this kind of program are, of course, a very serious factor in deciding the length of the broadcast and the frequency of the broadcast, and also, of course, by definition, the extent of the contents that can be accommodated in each of the broadcasts. This is the Khoodeelaar television channel, broadcasting under the banner of the BabyAngelGeronimoManifestoeditions, accompanied by the baby angel Skajiwan and her family of kittens. That means that from 1978 to now, there have been kittens. I call them kittens, regardless of their age, their fur colors, etc. All kittens, all felines are kittens. So this is a broadcast that is continuing the latest ethical and moral campaign focusing on the fragmentation of the pretended UK state. Because if you look at for example, the one that I'm currently studying is a textbook. The textbook that has been authored by two non-Cambridge University academics, but it is published by the Cambridge University Press about British constitutional administrative law. Now, when I was I have attended various colleges or courses of law. So, one of the courses that I was attending, I found that my comments and my essays on constitutional administrative law were getting me higher formal marks than my comments on the other aspects of the package, the curriculum, the legal curriculum. I've been studying law for a very, very long time. Before I arrived in the United Kingdom 51 plus years ago, I studied law at various levels and I practiced campaigning law, constitutional law, international law, and the outcome dictated to me that I was on the right track, the correct track, because the campaigning issues that I took with the then British Home Office when I was advocating the rights of or the needs of the people seeking entry into the United Kingdom, I'm talking about the 1960s, showed that I got it right and the British Home Office got it wrong. I'm talking about the 1960s. And let's say that starting from the 1960s, 1970s, 80s, 90s, and these last 3 decades, I have not stopped studying and empirically testing the veracity of my analysis and diagnosis of the law. I have not found one single event, incident that actually has been proven the other way, other than the way that I directed and moved it. So the people who wrote this particular edition, the Cambridge University, and this is the one that the Cambridge University Press says is the first one on constitutional administrative law that the Cambridge University Press has published. Now, how long has the Cambridge University been in existence for? And why is it only now that they have published a textbook on administrative and constitutional law or constitutional and administrative law? My analysis applies to the British academics. Similarly, as it applies to the British media, including the BBC, they're shallow, essentially shallow. And the Times newspaper, regardless of who owns the title, is supposed to have had a history of being called or recognized or treated as the newspaper of record. Absolute rubbish. The Times is not a newspaper of record. The Times is a newspaper of falsehood, fraud. Saturday's Times boasted that when William Rees-Mogg was editing the Times actually secured the release of Mick Jagger. I mean, where do you begin? Mick Jagger does not represent politics, never has done, except as a parasite, political parasite. None of the British pop characters, front man or front woman, none of them has represented substance, political substance, which is why Little England persists and festers in being Little England intellectually. I mean, with all the hype associated with David Bowie, John Lennon, etc., 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 what have they contributed to the international understanding, contextual understanding of the behavior and the decision making, actual prejudices and hostility and hatred that underlie the decision making in government, by government, through government. And this textbook defers to the UK executive, even when it is discussing supposedly the various organs of state, especially in this context, the judiciary. It is representative of the status quo view that the executive warrants, deserves to be deferred to, even by the judiciary. So, as I said, I mean, when I said what I said, and that is all on the record, about David Neuberger, the so-called first president of the UK Supreme Court, that he was a phony, that he was essentially available on hire, because when David Lidington was acting as de facto deputy prime minister to Theresa May, Lidington was, of course, the justice minister or the secretary of state for department unjustly called justice. It was Lidington who kind of bribed Neuberger into becoming a spokesperson for the British judiciary. But he got it wrong as well there, because he misrepresented the actual organization and referred to London courts. The British judiciary is not London courts, or London courts are not all of the British judiciary. But Neuberger didn't even get that right. And Neuberger was actually reported as having said all of those things at the behest of David Lidington by the notorious spy reporter on the now deceased London Evening Standard, Bentham, Martin Bentham. So all these people who are promoted as huge intellectual entities are bogus. So look at the exhibition being made this weekend by the Daily Mail group around the congenital liar Boris Johnson. I mean, Boris Johnson is a congenital liar. He's no source of august, heavyweight thought or thoughtfulness. And despite the hype about his parasitical memoir being hyped as the memoir of the century, there is no substance in it. Absolutely no substance in it at all. There is no substance in the memoir being wrongly peddled by the Daily Mail group as the memoir of the century. There is absolute no substance at all. And yet, in a piece in the Sunday Times, the chief political commentator is promoting Boris Johnson's return as the successful frontal for the Conservatives already. Now, that is obviously being linked in his subconscious, that linked with the plight of the Starmer fronted Labour government, because the list of Starmer's cabal receiving the corrupt money and benefits from the crook Wahid Ali, published in the Times on Saturday, is absolutely disgraceful. So these are the things that have influenced or are influencing the various kind of things that are short-termish being uttered by the Conservatives. They think that the Labour Party landslide of the 4th of July 2024 is done for because of the corruption and sleaze and dishonesty and greed exhibited by Starmer. That's not the case. To get rid of that kind of landslide within the context of the UK will take longer than these people appear to think. And even if Starmer is replaced, which I think is on the cards, when it will happen is not something I can pinpoint, but it will happen because Starmer has severely kind of underestimated the response and is seriously damaged as a incumbent prime minister or incumbent leader of the Labour Party. Just a side note, there was a kind of action replay, fantasy of course, in the last week or so, a picture of Jeremy Corbyn with the former leader of the United Trade Union, Len McCluskey. And the line is that Lutfur Rahman is also part of the alliance that Jeremy Corbyn is forming, or Jeremy Corbyn-centered elements are forming. Nothing could be more ridiculous. As I have said consistently, world exclusively, for the entire duration of Jeremy Corbyn's frontage as the leader of the Labour Party in Parliament and in the United Kingdom, Corbyn is not a leader, never has been, never will be, because Corbyn intellectually is seriously deficient. For example, I noticed exclusively again that whenever he would leave his home at the time, whatever the place was, there would, of course, be media people, mainly people from the broadcasting outlets, because you can tell by they are holding the microphones and camera at him. The one thing that Corbyn persistently kept doing, completely ill-advisedly, was to run away from the gang of these media people. My advice would have been to him, and I never offered the advice, I only published my opinion for the record, for the longer run, because my opinion and comments will outlast Corbyn and others. Now, what happened was that every time he would leave his home, come out of his house or home or whatever, and there would be obviously a transport waiting for him, instead of walking to the transport, now that could be a security reason, but I mean, he could have moderated it. He could have kind of, if you like, amended the way he moved to the transport waiting. He would go straight for the transport, sometimes looking like he's running. Now, my advice would have been for him to confront these essentially hostile media. Every day or every time that he came out of his house, Corbyn should have addressed those people about the issue of the day, and he should have updated his commentary, his position every single day on every single issue. If he had done that, all the criticisms about him being an anti Semite or anti Jewish people and anti whatever would not have the impact that they have had. Now, that is one thing. The other thing is that he would have put on the defensive all these media people, because all the media people, and I mean all the media people, all seniority, all experience, etc., are completely shallow. The British media is a shallow collection. So take the example, let's say from home. Home meaning the territory that I actually define my defense by, which is the KhoodeelaarTVChannel campaign, defending the community in the East End of London, from the East End of London. This school that became the Bethnal Green School later, by the time Shamima Begum and her friends were born, was actually the Danforth School in the 1990s. In the middle 1990s, I campaigned to keep the Danforth School a single-sex, boys-only school. And the details of the arguments, I'm not repeating here, but the details of the arguments are well extensively published and they are vindicated. Now, the reason why I defended the status quo of the Danforth School as the single sex boys' school was because of historical lessons that have been learned by people, including in the case of Danforth School, it was essentially overly subscribed by Jewish parents. And the Jewish parents knew that a single sex boys' school of that description was better as a school for their children, for their boys, than it would be if it became a mixed sex school, which is what happened now. It may be a coincidence, but by the time these children, Shamima Begum and her two close friends, the three of them, I noticed first in February 2015, in the media reports after they had been reportedly able to get into Syria. Now, these children attended a school that didn't have any identifiable ethos. Now, by ethos, I mean the ethos about the truth about the background of the children's parents and families. Why do the people like, the Big Ten community, the Bangladeshis, why are they here in the United Kingdom? They're not here as representatives of any political party in Bangladesh, or they were not when their predecessors pre 1971 came in the 1950s and 60s. They were not representing any political party or agenda. They were essentially, absolutely, primarily, mainly, overwhelmingly economic migrants. So the connection with the purpose of the migration would have been the main overwhelming influence to guide, as a guidance for these girls, these children, so that they would not be tempted to go into or stray into territories where they could be vulnerable to grooming and all the other things. If they really had the lessons, the teachings of migration, as I understand it, because in the 1960s, I sent a lot of people to the United Kingdom. I created their legal instruments and documents, and I actually sent the people, hundreds of them. So I know why the people came here, because I'm one of the rare people in the whole of the subcontinent who sent people there and have been here for the last 52 years, following them. So these children were deprived of the real education about the reason why their parents, grandparents, etc., came to the United Kingdom. And they were deprived, therefore, of the deterrence from getting lured to and exposed to groomers. Now, the piece or the film that the BBC published, broadcast by one of the reporters who apparently spent more than a year or so talking to and investigating Shamima Begum as she exists in Syria or outside of the United Kingdom. That is shallow. And all the racists who commented on that did that in denial of the existence of people like me. And there is nobody else with that extensive, dedicated, exclusive knowledge and commitment that I have. And the fact that they actually keep doing these documentaries and pieces without referring to me is not because they don't know what I've been saying. It's because they don't want to acknowledge the truth of what I'm saying, and they don't want to acknowledge the actual defects and the flaws of the UK state. When this criminal, the son of a Pakistani bus driver, stupid Javed, was installed as Home Secretary, he was not installed as Home Secretary because of his intellect. He was installed as Home Secretary because of the purpose ethnicity exhibit. And he did the job. His biggest achievement was to rob the British by birth nationality from Shamima Begum. That is his biggest achievement. Can you believe that? And so when I campaigned in the 1990s for the retention of the Daneford School as Daneford's single sex boys' school, things that I could not anticipate. I mean, that was what, 95, 2005, 15, 20 years before, more than 20 years before these children were reportedly in Syria out of the United Kingdom. But that kind of consequences were very much in the frame of my mind when I campaigned, or when I agreed to campaign for the retention of that school as the single sex boys' school. The campaign that I did to retain the Marlbury School the previous decade was successful. And the success of Marlbury School and the failure of the Daneford School campaign are clear for everyone objectively looking at the evidence to see. Because Marlbury School became one of the 2 or 3 most successful secondary schools in all of the United Kingdom. So much so that when he was in place as the president of the USA, Barack Obama allowed his wife, Michelle Obama, to visit the Marlbury School. Now, can you imagine that? That was because of me. It's not a boast. Because the entire Labour Party membership of the Bangladeshi community was sleeping when I was campaigning to stop the Labour Party's bid in the 1980s to mix the Marlbury School as a single sex, instead of being a single sex school, to make it a mixed sex operation. And I collected the signatures over 3-4 months. I had no children there, just as I didn't have any children in the Daneford School. And the result was that the Secretary of State was Kenneth Baker, the conservative, 1980s, Thatcher's regime. He understood and accepted our objection and said no to the Inner London Education Authority, the local Tower Hamlets Council and the Inner London Education Authority, both being fronted by the Labour careerists. And it was rejected. If it was not rejected, the school would have become mixed sex, and Michelle Obama would not be able to come to congratulate them as one of the most successful girls' schools in the whole of the United Kingdom. Now, none of these actions I have taken is because of career. Because if I were doing the career, I would have long ago been a member of parliament and etc., etc., etc. But I have never had any cravings to become a member of parliament or a minister. Before I came to the United Kingdom, I had offers to join a government or more than one regime, but I said no. Now, do they understand? Those creeps that actually are silent now about the disastrous mayor system. Remember, I started talking about this segment about Len McCluskey and Corbyn being featured in a publicity event that contains Luther Roman as well. Now, this is a proven liar, fraudster. I mean, what is he doing? And the Labour Party, the Bangladeshi Labour Party, if you like, or the Bangladeshi origin members of the Labour Party, in Tower Hamlets are completely bankrupt, morally bankrupt, politically bankrupt, and ideologically and intellectually unfit for purpose. How did they allow Luther Rahman to get back into the spot as mayor in the name of Tower Hamlets? How did they do that? I put this question to Abbasuddin Elias Halal not long after the 2022 so-called election. And Abbasuddin Elias Halal, typically of Abbasuddin Elias Halal, was completely in denial. He blamed John Biggs. Now, that was not my purpose in asking the question. My purpose was, how did they allow Lutfur? That didn't mean how did they allow Lutfur rather than somebody else to be returned as mayor at the expense of Tower Hamlets. My question meant, why did the post of mayor not get abolished, scrapped? Lutfur Rahman could only get elected again if the post existed. If the post didn't exist, he would not have been able to seek election to it after the expiry of the 5 years of ban that Richard Morey had imposed on him. But Abbasuddin was completely unable to understand that. In any case, whatever I asked, Abbasuddin's main concern was to get away from me so that he would not be asked any more questions. That happened in the Bishop's Gate. Abbasuddin has been the beneficiary of a rewarding spot given to him by the racists for a long time as a reward for his mental slavery. What is happening to Tower Hamlets Council matters to the community. I mean, can you believe this? There is not all the wealth that these people have generated or collected or created for themselves and showing off their wealth by building idiotic structures back in the villages across Sylhet. All of that put together would not amount to 1 year's money that is available to Lutfur Rahman to spend in the name of Tower Hamlets Council. Now, that is a phenomenal difference. That is a phenomenal amount that gives the power, phenomenal power to these people. What has he been doing for the community? Nothing. And Richard Morey got it absolutely wrong when he appeared to make critical comments about Lutfur Rahman over Lutfur Rahman's stated position about John Biggs, that Biggs's statement to the BBC London in 2013 saying words to the effect that Lutfur Rahman's regime, as the first regime that is following the election of October 2010, had been making favorable grants to the west side of the Bharat Hamlets. And Biggs, the racist, didn't hesitate he actually said that that was because that side and the grant applicants were mainly Bangladeshis. That's a lie. That was a lie and will always be a lie. Because Lutfur Rahman is not in the post by recognizing the community which remains the victim of racism as it is, as it should be, recognized, that is. But Lutfur Rahman is only making decisions that he is advised by his handlers based at the East London Mosque that would keep him in the post. That is a very big difference. If those people, the applicants, happen to be of Bangladeshi background, but that is not the reason why Lutfur Rahman was motivated to give them grants. The motivation was to speculate as to which individuals would make sure that he got the votes, their support, their backing. It is a significant coincidence, but it is not at all ethnically or racially connected. But Mori was absolutely wrong on that. But I'm the only one who has been pointing this out, not anybody else. When I say anybody else, who are the people that I'm referring to? Of course, I'm referring to the people who claim to be and have been put on the record as having been the petitioners against Lutfur Rahman. Where are they? They're completely dead. Because they never wanted democracy, accountability, transparency, or proper service by the council, serving the whole community as a whole. They wanted to have a go at Lutfur Rahman for something else that they had a quarrel with him about, not for the principle morality. That is why they're dead. And about those parasites who sought the wisdom, can you believe that? The wisdom from a completely deep-seated, hateful racist called Peter Golds. Peter Golds is the worst racist around in the country after Katie Hopkins. I caught the two of them walking or standing in the Deal Street off the Hanbury Street sometime in 2015. And the minute Peter Golds saw me on the other side of the Deal Street, from the side opposite to the side that they were standing on, Peter Golds literally ran to a waiting car. And Katie Hopkins, the racist of the United Kingdom, followed him. And within seconds, the car had disappeared down the street and into the Balance Road. Now, why would Peter Golds be so scared of the fact, not of me, but of the fact that I had witnessed them? What on earth was Peter Golds doing with Katie Hopkins in Brick Lane? Obviously, Golds had brought Hopkins to show the horrors being caused by the Pakis, which is no doubt what he and Hopkins think of Bangladeshis as being, because to them, the word Pakis includes the whole of the subcontinent. Because essentially, the people that inhabit in the demography in Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, and even most of Sri Lanka are people of similar ethnic and if you like, racial origins. What on earth, therefore, were the parasites associated with Abbasuddin Ali's Halal doing, seeking the wisdom of Peter Goulds on how to do politics around Tower Hamlets Council? None of them. Absolutely none of them is fit for purpose. And for them to then go and seek wisdom from a racist of the worst description as Peter Goulds shows that they didn't have anything in their brains. The only Bangladeshi in the 4-member petitioners, Ajmal Hussain, is a disciple of Peter Goulds. I caught him. And Peter Goulds is a liar because in the period up to the kind of last 2 months before the election of May 2010, there was this referendum question, wasn't there? Whether there should be an elected mayor or not. Peter Goulds, I took his picture in the Brady Center. Peter Goulds spoke on a platform, no dictatorship, no mayor. And he then became a candidate. Just as Abbasuddin Ali Salam, who was supposedly campaigning against the post, only to be exposed as a candidate for the Labour Party for the post of mayor. So these are brazen liars. What morality have they got to challenge any immoral behavior by Starmer or any of these Zionists that are controlling the Labour Party post 4th of July 2024? None. So therefore, when Len McCluskey and Jeremy Corbyn were featured with Lutfur Rahman on tour with them, what did that peddling exhibit represent? Remind of when Lutfur Rahman was in post, before the petition against him was filed and in process, he made a decision as the incumbent mayor in the name of Tower Hamlets to pay more than £50,000 from Tower Hamlets Council's funding to an outfit run by Len McCluskey's Unite Union in the Cable Street. Think about that. Just think about that. McCluskey's Unite Union, regardless of who has been the General Secretary, has been, if not the biggest, one of the two biggest funders of the Labour Party. What on earth was Lutfur Rahman doing, paying any money to anything that was run by McCluskey's outfit in Cable Street? We shall be continuing these commentaries and questions, world exclusive original, in due course, of course, ending this one at 21:43 GMT.